Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Sunday School here at the Lighthouse Church of the Nazarene in Moravia, Iowa. We're going through the book of Isaiah, and this week we're in Isaiah chapter 58. Now, last week in chapter 57, we found out that when a righteous man is taken from this earth, that they're still alive and they're just doing great. Remember what Billy Graham said. Billy Graham said, "One day you will read that Billy Graham has died. Do not believe it. On that day, I will be more alive than I have ever been." So, when we take our last breath here on this earth, we're going to take our first breath in heaven, absent from the body, present from the Lord. And our home, it is in heaven. We are merely just passing through this earth. And we need to take an eternal perspective in about everything we do. So, this week in chapter 58, it's going to deal with shallow worship. That's what God's going to talk about. Because after all, we can look great on the outside, but we can still be a mess on the inside. Now, Jesus, he talked about the Pharisees like that, and he referred to them as whitewashed tombs. He said, hey, on the outside, you look great, but on the inside, you're dead. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. Just empty ritual versus wholehearted worship to God. So we're in Isaiah chapter 58. Let's get out our Bibles and let's follow along. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 1. Isaiah says, "Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Tell my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob their sins." So he's saying, hey, cry aloud. Sound the alarm. Make sure everyone hears this. Everyone needs to know about this. Verse 2. "Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching God." So, what are they doing? They appear like they are doing everything right. But guess what? It's all for show. And this can happen to us too in our walk with Christ, when our walk with Christ just turns into habits and rituals. Just, oh, check another box. I made it to church this week. I got that done. If your church has altars, like, well, I haven't been down to the altar for a while. I better go down there just to let people know that I still care. Okay, I check that box. We can't let our walk with Christ just turn into empty rituals. Let's keep going here. Verse 3. "For they say, why have we fasted, and you have not seen? Why have we afflicted our souls, and you take no notice? In fact, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exploit all your labors." So what are they doing? They're saying, hey, God, we're fasting, and you don't even notice anything about it. All right, we're going to talk about fasting for just a little bit right here. All right, first off, let's define it. What is fasting? Fasting is the voluntary abstinence of something, most likely food is what most people do, for a limited period of time with a specific purpose of drawing near to God. The interesting, fasting mentioned over 70 times in the Bible, but of the spiritual disciplines, it's the least taught and least practiced of any of them. The Puritans, when they talked about fasting, they referred to fasting, abstaining from food, as soul fattening, as nutrition for the soul is what the Puritans referred to fasting as. All right, let's talk about it for a little bit here again. So while fasting, it's not explicitly commanded in the Bible, Jesus does tell us that it is expected and that it will be rewarded. In the 9th chapter of Matthew, John the Baptist's disciples come to Jesus and they say, hey, how come we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples don't fast? And Jesus tells them, like, well, can the friend of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with him? But the day will come when the bridegroom will be taken away, and then they will fast. So Jesus said, like, well, they can't fast now. I'm walking with them in the flesh here on this earth, but when I'm taken away, guess what? Then they will fast. So Jesus tells us that fasting is expected. But not only is it expected, Jesus also tells us that it'll be rewarded. Because he says, this is in the 6th chapter of Matthew, he says, do not be like the Pharisees with a sad countenance on their face when they're fasting. So evidently everybody knew it when they were fasting. And Jesus said, they have their reward. And he says, but you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret, listen to this, will reward you openly. So Jesus tells us fasting on our part, it's expected. He also tells us that it will be rewarded. So we've already said fasting is expected, but you want to know this? It's not clearly defined in the Bible. There is no exact formula for when you fast, you do it for this many days, for this long, how, when, how often. No, that's entirely up to us. It's just important that the focus be on God. So when we're fasting, what we're saying is, hey, I have something so important in my life. I'm willing to forego eating to spend that time seeking with God. And when my stomach's growling, that growling, it's just going to be another reminder that I need to be praying right now. All right, so let's keep going here. Verse 3, why have we fasted and they say you have not seen? Why have we afflicted our souls and you take no notice? In fact, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exploit all your laborers. So they're saying, hey, God, I'm trying to live for you, and you just aren't noticing. That they felt like God was being unfair to them. But God's saying, hey, when you're fasting, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. The Bible tells us in Psalm 119 too that we have to seek God with our whole heart. We have to put him above everything else. And it's not just seeking God to get his blessings or to have him fix our problems. No, it's just to want more of him. In the 18th chapter of Luke, Jesus tells a story about the Pharisee and the tax collector. And the Pharisee, he's doing everything right. When he prays, he says, Lord, I thank you that I'm not like other men, thieves, extortioners, or even this tax collector. I tithe and I fast twice a week. But then the tax collector says, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And you know what Jesus says? He says, that man went down justified, not the Pharisee. The Pharisee, he was the one doing everything right, tithing, fasting twice a week. The other man, he just said, Lord, have mercy upon me, a sinner. All right, let's keep going here. Verse 4. Indeed, you fast for strife and debate, and to strike with the fist of wickedness. You will not fast as you do this day, to make your voice heard on high. So this is the hypocrisy of it right there. On their fast days, what were they doing? They were still pursuing personal gain. They were still exploiting their labors. They were quarreling with others, and they were just plain acting wickedly. So what's the point of this? There's no point in trying to live for God and not clearing up our personal life. James addresses this in his book. He says, if anyone among you thinks that he is religious, but you don't bridle your own tongue, your religion is useless. Could you imagine God saying, hey, your religion, it's useless? The Bible tells us that we have to be doers of the word and not just hearers only. We have to put our faith into action. Let's keep going here. Verse 5. Is it a fast that I have chosen? God saying, have I chosen a day for man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Would you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Fasting, it's meant to be a humbling experience. We're saying, God, food's important to me, but you are even more important. Now, I was going to go through a bunch of the fasts in the Bible, but they're actually too numerous to mention. Moses, he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights when he was receiving the 10 Commandments. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights when he was tempted in the wilderness. Elijah traveled for 40 days, fasted in the Spirit of the Lord. An interesting one is Daniel. Daniel did a 21-day partial fast where he just abstained, I believe it was from meat and wine, just pleasure stuff. He fasted from that. Esther, she fasted for 3 days before going and talking to the king, which is interesting because the king was her husband, but she still that worried about going and talking, fasted for 3 days and declared a fast before she went and talked to the king. The Ninevites, when Jonah went to Nineveh and said, yet 40 days Nineveh will be overthrown, they proclaimed a fast, and even their animals fasted in that day. And one more interesting one to look about. King David, it's in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 16. When Nathan the prophet came to him and said, you are that man, judged him, and said that child was going to die, do you know what happened? King David actually went and fasted for 7 days, pleading for that child's life. But you know what? That child still died. So there we have an example of someone who fasted for 7 days and still didn't get what they want with King David. So let's just keep going here. Verse 6. Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. So God's saying, hey, how about you forget fasting from food? How about we just fast from oppressing people? That might be the best thing to do right here. Verse 7, is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out. This isn't just buying them a motel room. God's saying, bring them into your house. It's hospitality. When you see the naked, that you cover them and not hide yourself from your own flesh. All right, there's a lot of these things right here we need to discuss real quick. First, he's saying, hey, are we doing these things? How about you fast? How about you share your bread with the poor and the hungry? How about you bring the poor into your house and provide for them? One of the most powerful things that Jesus talked about, it's in Matthew chapter 25. Jesus talked about the judgment of the nations, and he says, everybody's going to be gathered together before me. And to some people, he's going to say, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire. Because I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not take me in. And they're going to say, Lord, when did we see you all these things and not do them to you? And Jesus said, when you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me. So we need to ask ourselves, are we doing these things? Feeding the poor, helping the poor and the needy, showing hospitality to people. Because after all, Jesus said, if you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. If you do not do it to the least of these, you do not do it to me. Yep, interesting stuff right here. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Then your light shall break forth like the morning, your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. When they were traveling the desert all those years, that they had the Shekinah glory, God going before them and God as their rear guard. Cool stuff. Verse 9. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. Notice the conditionality here that is signified. If you do these things, then when you call, God will hear you. He puts a condition there. God does hear our prayers. Sometimes the answer is no, but he does hear our prayers. Verse 10. If you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness. What's he saying? Hey, how about you start putting others ahead of yourselves? We all do it. We all get so focused on our own lives and everything we have going on. But you have to put others ahead of yourselves. The Bible tells us in Philippians 2:4. What did Paul say? He said, do not worry about your own needs, but also about the needs of the others. All right, let's keep going here. Verse 11. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in a drought and strengthen your bones, and shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Isn't that a great verse? The Lord will be your guide. So what's the Bible telling us here? If we turn from empty rituals and we worship God with our whole heart, he will be our guide. And guess what? We all need divine intervention, divine guidance in our lives. Jesus said, it's John 15:5. Without me, you can do nothing. We need God to instruct us. He is our shepherd. He will lead us in everything we do. We just have to seek him first in everything we do. Verse 12. Those from among you shall build the whole old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. Now, this is interesting right here. Isaiah is telling them, guess what? You're going to rebuild Jerusalem. But Jerusalem hasn't even been destroyed yet. Jerusalem still has to be destroyed by the Babylonians. They still have their 70 years of captivity, and then they come back and rebuild Jerusalem under Ezra and Nehemiah. So he's predicting stuff that they have no idea that's even going to happen yet. Verse 13. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. Verse 14. Then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. I love that right there. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. This is the word of God that we are reading right here. So the main point of this chapter is put God first. Authentic worship, wholehearted worship, not just empty rituals. And also, we need to start including fasting into our spiritual life if we aren't practicing it already. So that's Isaiah 58. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you learned something. I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Bye.